So my name is Jana Visser and I am a textile artist, hand weaver, designer, maker, originally from South Africa. And I have kind of been pivoting between the Netherlands, Belgium and South Africa for the past 5 years now. I came to Ghent, I think 4 years ago, to start my master's degree in textile design. And it was really at that point where I could have the necessary time and creative freedom to question my own identity as someone who's really drawn to threads and fibers, and how can I nourish that curiosity. And since then I've been participating in residencies and internships and really trying to place myself within a wider network of like-minded people. Yeah, I think there's a lot of thinking and a lot of meticulous planning involved in drafting or creating a weaving draft before the actual act of weaving can commence. So there's a lot of mental activity and a lot of thinking and a lot of calculations and measurements, and there's all these parameters that you have to consider when you are setting up or preparing your loom. And I do enjoy that aspect of it, but the real magic happens when you are engaging with your threads on the loom. There's these kind of unexpected little, not mistakes, but little errors and little particular nuances that pop up when certain threads are combined or when I bring them into contact with each other. And it's also, it tests how I respond and how tuned in to my material I am. So it really requires a lot of my attention and concentration, and responding to things that just happen in that moment that I can't ascertain beforehand. So I like that element of surprise and like this discovery as you weave along and as the textile develops along the way. Yeah, I think my first introduction to like weaving and theory about weaving and the history about the craft of weaving was definitely Annie Albers. She's the wife of Joseph Albers, and she's kind of was seen as this pioneer during the Bauhaus period. She's both a textile artist and printmaker, and it was really her writing on tactile sensibility, which was a kind of like a theory that she promoted in a book called On Weaving, which was also written by her, I think from 1965 or something. And she, in this chapter on tactile sensibility, she really writes about the value of gaining knowledge through engaging with textures and surfaces. And there's this one phrase or sentence or chapter in that book that she states, we touch the things that we make or that surround us in order to assure ourselves of our own reality. But in modern contexts, we have kind of reduced the necessity to form things ourselves, or we would rather grab something pre-made or something mass-produced, and we then reduce the opportunity to actually engage with things in a very sensorial manner, and thereby detach ourselves from our own reality. And that's always stuck with me throughout in life, but also in my own weaving practice, because I'm really considering the sense of touch, the tactile, the hand, the artist hand, the weaving hand, or actually like the entire body. So yeah, I would definitely always revert to referencing Annie as my kind of big guiding main thread that's kind of been throughout my development as a textile artist. And then I have a book on Lenore Tawney, which I've brought with me from South Africa. She was active in the 50s and 60s in New York, and her weavings and sculptural, tactile, three-dimensional weavings really introduced me to weaving almost as a sculpture and its three-dimensional possibilities, and thinking beyond the weaving loom and what could happen, thinking of weaving not just in the traditional sense. She was also, I think, one of the first weavers who demanded that her work hang in space as opposed to against the wall. And she has this one installation called her Cloud series, which is just loose hanging linen threads. They're not interacting, they're not like brought into contact with each other, but just their mere proximity to each other was seen as enough to be called a weaving. So like weaving without weaving, but creating a certain atmosphere. And I guess, yeah, those two women are really always in the back of my mind, and their work and their philosophy as well, when I'm thinking and when I'm making. And yeah, just trying to cultivate my own sensibility, but still keeping in mind those who came before me and continuing this, you could say, feminine energy of connectedness throughout my career. Yeah. Well, philosophy and weaving, philosophy as like a love of wisdom. I have a need to know more about weaving. Like the more I develop my craft or my skill, the more I come to realize there's so much more to know, and there's so much that I can still learn. Weaving is a philosophy for me in itself. It requires so much devotion and intense concentration. I'm very aware when I'm weaving, but then sometimes it can also just put me in this like mindless daze, and I can just continue on and on and on. And then there will be like a little pause or an interruption, or there's something that's diverting my attention away from it. And then I'm brought back into that reality or that present moment. So it really tests the intensity of my attentiveness and my presence. And that teaches me to also approach or apply that in real life as well. They're both very much real life, and the weaving practice for me there's no actual distinguished difference between the two. And then also the grid is such a big metaphor for larger things outside of your own singular existence, the vertical and the horizontal. When I'm weaving, I need to be concentrated on every little detail, so it's a very microscopic approach to being busy with something. But also you have to think in a broader context, because every small gesture contributes to a greater collective, larger rhythm. So there's the singular, but also the plural, and the one thing contributes to a bigger whole, essentially. The weaving actually already starts with the thinking. When you are ideating it in your mind and thinking of, okay, what is it that I need to consider, and measurements and width and length and the density of the warp, how many threads, what weft will I use, how transparent or how dense will I weave it. And then there's the actual weaving, which is also a life cycle in its own. And then there's this moment of release when the textile that was on a specific tension on the loom, on this rigid frame, is released from the loom. It's almost as if it becomes reborn, because it completely takes on a different fluid, susceptible shape. It's not stretched tightly on the frame anymore. It can now, it's now kind of receptive to gravity, to light, to shifting atmospheres, to wind, to movement. So I don't necessarily think finished, but just, okay, it's now going into a different phase, and placing it now in queens, it's also taken on a different life form or a different phase of its whole cycle. As I said before, like there's a lot of planning and meticulous note-taking and writing and calculation involved if you want to set up a loom. And every time I have taken one piece off of the loom, it's like an iteration of a previous idea, and it then also stimulates the one that will come after it. So there's these iterations of the same curiosity and the same desire or need to cultivate my own sensibility. Like I set myself certain limitations in the sense that I don't use bold, loud colors, or I prefer natural yarns, or raw in their raw form, or rather using or choosing fibers or threads for their certain tactility or surface qualities, or maybe they have a certain tensile property, which is very interesting for me. So there's limitations, and in that it's a way for me to create my own sensibility rather than like a style or an aesthetic or like a certain style of weaving, but more a sensibility and a certain sensitivity to the threads that I'm using. I really associate with the idea that matter has an agency, like it's not static or lifeless. Threads have an agency, like they have an autonomy. So I want to try and be susceptible to their properties and their qualities as well, and be guided by that, and then guiding the thread along the warp. Queens has such a presence on its own that at first, when I was given this opportunity, I was slightly apprehensive, because how could my textiles exist in each room having such a unique energy and atmosphere and lots of details, and each room has so many layers on its own already. So it was an interesting challenge for me to consider how my work could exist within them. Queen's Brussels Gallery is far beyond like a white wall, sterile gallery context. And I've been really trying to also consider the fact that it is a house with a lived-in history. And then using that element and combining it with my work, which is textiles, which actually have their own historical link to the home, comfort, domesticity, or as a functional object that are used in homes. So I find that quite an interesting link, the house with textiles, or showing textiles in the house or in the home. And living in the gallery for a while now, I've been using the staircase on a daily basis. And that's really drawn me in as this lifeline, or this main windpipe, or providing like oxygen to all the rooms of the house as a living, breathing organism on its own. So I've been trying to respond to that by weaving lengths of certain transparencies that mimic each flight of stairs. The act of going up or down the staircase has also emphasized like an awareness of my own breathing. When you are going all the way up, all the way down, there's a physical sensation of climbing the stairs. So I've been responding to that whilst creating a site-specific installation for the staircase at Queen's. And then also the stepping rhythm, the motion of stepping up or down. I find that a very interesting reference to the lifting motion of my lifting sequence on my loom. So there's a certain correlation between the rhythm of walking up or down and lifting the shafts on my loom. Which I really enjoy exploring even further. In essence, to slow down and sense. In my work, I'm always trying to emphasize materiality and the physicality of the making process. So in Breathing Matter, I really hope that the subtlety of the work draws the audience or draws the viewer closer. To really allow them enough time to slowly and intentionally observe surface and intricacy and subtleties, and in that way also becoming aware or tapping into their own rhythm in that moment, and also realizing coming to realize their own internal position in that moment, but at the same time, their relation to a wider network or wider web work are reality.